Okay, so welcome everyone to this week's coffee chat, and this evening's special guest is Maryline. And Maryline is a grief recovery specialist, and she's going to introduce herself to you in a moment. But the topics that we're going to cover tonight are around grief and loss, and that covers more than bereavement, but I'll let Maryline say a little bit more about that. So over to you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me, Maureen. And yes, so I'm a grief recovery specialist. So I've been doing that for a couple of years, but grief is kind of something that has been with me all my life. So it's a very a subject that is dear to my heart. So my experience, my first experience, I lost my mom when I was 4. And actually realized there was a lot of taboo around it, and that's why I made it my mission to kind of talk more about it and help people with it. Yeah, so the most important realizing, so we've been like through nearly a year now of COVID, so that's something that has been very, very relevant now, I think, because COVID has been, we've been on confinement, we've been told to stay home, we've lost a lot of freedom, we've lost control, we've had a lot of financial, maybe a lot of people financial difficulties, and also we had a lot of bereavement, and with a lot of secondary loss. So when we talk about grieving and loss, we're actually kind of talking about a lot of, we don't realize that we're grieving for many, many losses more than actually bereavement, and all that, can have a lot of effect on us. So the secondary loss are quite important as also. The fact, for example, that people might have lost a family member, a friend, and never been able to actually say goodbye and be there for them. So it's a secondary, not being able to say goodbye. It's all like what's happening besides the loss, So that's kind of very relevant to the times that we are living right now. So, and we don't realize that we're actually grieving for a long time. And I think what happens also is with grieving and the society we live in and how people understand loss, there is certain myths and certain things that's set up. So let's say we've got like I think people give us about 3 months to get better, and then we've got to stop talking about it. And so people are feeling very uncomfortable with it all, so they don't really know what to do. And I think that's the main thing that we need to actually start talking about and be more at ease with it, because we just don't know what to do. People come to you and, they don't know, they don't want to pronounce the person that you're grieving, you're grieving, the name of the person you lost. People don't want to actually kind of engage with you. They don't know how to. So it's really awkward, and there is all this. And as a griever, you actually fall down. I mean, what you want is actually talk, and after that, what happens is you drop into a word on your own where you're trying to get out of it, and you just can't on your own, and you just fall, and at the end what you do is you put everything down, you push everything down and try to get your head over water and try to get out there, really, and put a smile on your face and carry on. So I think that's something that is really important to start talking about, really.
Wow, you've just covered a whole lot there, and I just just for introduction. So we really are going to dive into lots of that. So that's cool. But I know I let you go there. It was like, oh my God, that's going to be, you could just talk for the whole show.
Yes, I could. Just stop me and ask me questions.
Yeah. So thank you very much for also sharing your story, briefly, just that, you lost your mum at a very young age. And we'll certainly come on to that as well, because I've got an experience as well. I know we talked about having running a session where we talk about motherless daughters and, get people also who are in that group to come and join and talk about their experiences. So, we can do that some other time, but certainly we'll be able to cover that tonight. I just wanted to go back a little bit before all of the stuff that you shared. Just when we talk about grief, because I know a lot of what you mentioned there was around the bereavement aspects. You talk about loss and grief as not just bereavement. So really, can we just have a little insight about what people might, if they're not really thinking out of, at the moment, what sort of things would be a loss to them? What are those things?
I think somebody somewhere in the book has calculated that we actually there is about 40 different loss that we will kind of go through in our long lifetimes. So the most important, the one that are, I don't want to compare them, but we're going to go in logistic in some way. So it's bereavement. Divorce is an enormous one. Miscarriages, stillbirths, and that's two that are not really, stillbirths more than miscarriage, that are not really looked after a lot. So that's quite important. A loss of a pet, which is really, really important, because also we compare it a lot to a human being, but it's not. And then suddenly we're not allowing ourselves to actually see it as, it's not as important as a human being. And it doesn't go like that. So it is really important to look after that. After that, it could be immigrating. It could be moving house. It's a big one. Being made redundant is a big one. Financial loss is also something that is quite big. So there is loads of things. I mean, for example, maybe when you're moving house, maybe it's not something that you're going to actually do a big unresolved grief around, but it's important to acknowledge it. It's important to actually see it happen and pay attention and just say goodbye to the house as you go. And it could be as simple as that, but it's a point of being aware of it and, stopping a little bit and do it. Another grief as well, which is quite big. It's anybody that is actually coming out of an addiction. Like stopping smoking, for example, it's something you want to do when you're or any addiction, alcohol. There is a sense of loss of something that was normal for you to do, but suddenly is not anymore. And you're gonna be feeling something like a conflicted kind of emotion there, because although you really want, I remember stopping smoking. I was a smoker for a lot of years. and I stopped about, I think it's, that's something that happened with loss, is you remember exactly how long it's been. So it's been 13 years next month. And when you're actually doing it, so but you're missing, the whole thing is about, you're missing the ritual of having a cigarette with a coffee, having a cigarette with with a glass of wine, having a cigarette when you're meeting friends, and this is the whole ritual. And at the time, you know, when I stopped smoking, it was still in pubs and things. We could still smoke, and it's like this loss of what's normal to you, what's actually natural in that point, and that's what we're talking about, you know. And there is, although you want to stop, but also you feel sad about not having it, you know, not having the ritual still in your life. And I think this is the important things about grieving. You know, there is all very often a conflicting element of what you're feeling. When you're grieving, you're actually feeling about 5, 6 emotions at the same time. And that's what makes it really unbearable. That's what makes it, because when we go along during the day as a normal stage, we go a little bit, we're happy, and maybe like we get a little bit, but it's one at a time, and it goes along, and we go and toddle along our day. But when we're grieving, the whole lot could come all at once, and then you're completely like taken apart, and you don't know where you are, because there is all these emotions that are much too strong to actually comprehend all at once.
Yeah. So just wanted to mention a couple other things. I know you talked about COVID, so that's another thing that we can talk about, the losses associated with that a bit later.
Yeah.
And there was a loss that we talked about, I think, on the long video that we did as well, which I had in my mind, and I should have wrote it down now because I'd forgotten it. It will come back to me. But what I wanted to do was also pick up the point that you had on addiction, because actually often addiction, whether it be food, substances, whatever it might be, even exercise, and you know, overdoing lots of different things, is often to cover up or get rid of those and avoid those emotions, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. That's the thing. I mean, so, you know, very often, I mean, anger is one of those emotions that will kind of cover up your pain. But very often, what's going to happen is you're going to have you're going to make up a quick release, emotional release, in order for you to cope during the day or what. So you could be, for example, going to the fridge, getting the chocolate out, getting the bottle of wine out. You could be sleeping all the time, or you could be not sleeping. You know, you could also, but that's more of a symptom, actually. What you could be doing is going shopping. You could keep busy and more busy, so you don't think about it and you're not going to the pain. You could watch Netflix all day. You could be, so there again, so any addiction after that, you know, you could start to be an alcoholic, you could start a lot of addiction. But on the top of that, you could also go into going and spend 3 hours in the gym every day, which seems to be that it's a good thing to do. But then, is it a good thing to do if you're actually covering something that you're not resolving, or you're not recovering from? So that's something to pay attention of. Another one that I was thinking about it the other day, it's when you actually start to do some job as a rescuer. Okay, and you start to rescue people. So you start, you know, going and job in charities, and kind of make sure that you're busy with the charity and your rescue, and it makes you feel good. Makes you feel good to actually make sure that everybody is okay, except you. But and that was an interesting one, because they are very good, you know, for the society, they look really a nice one to do. It's a nice things to do. But the thing is, you're not actually getting on the top of your grief. And what might happen is grief is cumulative. So once you're not dealing with it, or you're not kind of completing with going getting complete with the pain. That's what we call it, really. And then next time you're going to have another loss, everything is going to come up, and there is one point where you're actually going to not feel good at all. And it might happen on the click of the bottom. You don't know when it will happen, because grief can come to you like that. And you don't know what happened, and you don't know where it's coming from, and it just gets to you. So
Yeah. So yeah, just on that, that was one of my experiences as well.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe that's a good point to kind of segue into that. My mother was killed in a bushfire on our farm in Australia, and she was actually found drowned in the creek. So she was in there to get away from the fire and the backburn, which was trapping her in the middle. And, you know, that was 20 years ago now, but for 15 years, I didn't realize I wasn't dealing with it. I was running half marathons. I was, going into hedonism and substance abuse and all sorts of stuff, just really, but like on a weekend basis. I wasn't addicted in a way that it was impacting my life, kind of thing. But, there was alcohol, there was, just overconsumption of lots of things. And certainly also in my work, you mentioned earlier about people just do something to avoid the pain. And that's exactly what I was doing. When this depression did actually hit me, it was at the time when what I would do is I'd go to work and I'd just keep my head down and kind of get my work done, and kind of, I felt really terrible inside, kind of thing. But I was just going there, doing my job, and then I'd come home and I'd fall apart in my own time, in my own space, kind of thing. But before I'd got to that point, there was so much stuff that I was really pushing myself. And actually, I didn't even know it. I didn't know that that's how I was reacting or responding. And it wasn't until I had sessions with a counselor that she got me to stop all that. And it's really kind of in my nature to push because of how I was brought up on the farm. And so it's kind of almost my go-to mechanism to avoid pain. So I mean, maybe we can sort of talk about symptoms like that now too. So, because I didn't know I had depression until I was told I had depression. I was just not feeling very good. I was, drinking a lot. I was also, like I said, over exercising. But the point where I got to where I did actually go and book an appointment with a counselor, it was on the same day I had the appointment. I was in the gym. I was in a class, so I was super fit at the time, and we were doing some exercises, and there was one exercise. I laid there on the floor and I just said, I just have got nothing left in me to lift my body off the floor for this V sit up. Like I could not, I just couldn't even will my mind. I was so exhausted probably at that point from avoiding. So let's just talk about the sort of symptoms probably that might help people.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to be, because they're going to be like depression, for example, because that's what you mentioned. I'm going to go on to depression. So depression doesn't mean all the time that it's going to be a loss or a grieving, but it's going to be most of the time. Because what is depression at the end of the day? Depression is like a suppressing your feeling, and kind of letting the feeling going down and not expressing them because it doesn't feel safe to express your feeling, or because you've been told not to express them when you're a kid. So there's two things that you might be like kind of quite prone to have depression for this kind. There is a thing that I heard the other day. It was the feel. I mean, as an analogy, it's like if you have like a big ball and you try to push it under the water. And you push it under the water and it's hard, and and you've got to actually kind of like, after a while, your arms are hurting and you start to actually not pay attention to what's going on around you. You don't see the kids playing, you don't see the birds, you don't see anything around you. There is nothing happening. You're still pushing, and you're using all your will to actually push the button until somebody tells you, oh, do you want me, instead of trying to let go of the ball, do you want me to actually help you to make your arm stronger? Or do you want me to actually, so that you are better at pushing it down, which antidepressant is, that's what you're doing. You get just because it will help you to keep this ball down under the water. But you see people around you that's got smaller balls. Or, you see people around you that actually the balls is so big that they're actually drowning under the water. So you just all of that instead of actually learning how to make the ball smaller in order for you. So the analogy is about the ball is your grief. And in order for you to actually let go of the ball completely. And that doesn't mean that the grief is gone. It just means that it's not as difficult to handle it. So I thought it was a beautiful analogy. I love it because depression, it's well, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not gonna nor do I know about mental health. But for me, a lot of it comes from suppressed feelings, really. So another thing another symptoms you might have is numbness. You're feeling completely numb. You're cutting yourself out. You go on autopilot, and that's quite normal. People are very scared to feel that because they start to feel guilty and ashamed that they're not feeling anything for their loss of a parent or whatever, and they just don't know what's going on. And it's purely that your body is not comprehending what's going on, and mentally you're just not there to deal with it. Therefore, you go in a numb feeling, and kind of autopilot. You can go. A lot of people go into anger or fears, a sense of injustice, that it's unfair, and it's not. So that's helping. The anger is helping to actually get you to feel something that is like really kind of get you moving inside. But it's not the pain that you dare not going there. So therefore, you go into that. Anxiety is another one. Anxiety, and the fear of losing other people once you've lost that one. Anxiety at the end of the day, it's a loss of control. You're not in control of what's going on, and when you lose somebody suddenly, or you're not in control, we're not in control of death. Death is going to happen to all of us, but we just don't know when, and we don't know when it's going to happen to the person we love beside us. So it can bring a lot of anxiety because of that. So after that, you've got maybe a change in appetite. So you can, have small appetite, big appetite, a change in energy. You're not feeling you can't concentrate anymore. What do I have as well? There is another thing. You can be needing to be busy and distracted. That's what we've been talking. And then you've got you start to feel isolated from others, because you want to talk about your loss. You don't know how, but it's very often it's after the funeral has come. This is it. You're on your own most of the time. It's some families are very good. They're very good at talking in between each other. They're very good at supporting each other. But very, very often it's like we don't deal with grief in the same way. So everybody's got their relationship with that person, if we talk about bereavement, in a certain way. And therefore, everybody is not going to be at the same thing. They're going to be, so for all the family to be kind of together into what they're going to do, and finding a new normal of how we're going to actually link to each other now that that person is gone. It's going to take a while to actually adjust to rituals, maybe finding a ritual for what's going on, finding something to do. So and I'm trying to think, I've got a paper here. I think I've gone through everything. I mean, we've got to be aware that the grief, when, even when we go through it, the grief will come in waves, and you don't know how and when. Suddenly you're just like kind of go into it, and you're completely taken by it, and that's still happened to me. And I don't know where it comes from, but now I know how to ride the wave, and I just let myself cry, let myself go, and it lasts an hour, it lasts 2 hours, but you just have to go with it and allow it to be. That's my main, if I've got to give a tip here tonight.
Yeah, so from my perspective, a number of those things that you've covered, I can say that I did experience. Like, I remember the experience of the numbness, like, and immediately following finding out that, from the police coming around to say, call your father, and then finding out my mum was suddenly dead. It was a fairly traumatic experience, which I didn't realize it was that traumatic because, like I said, growing up on the farm, we were taught no downtime, just get on with it. So I was brought up in that culture of just get on with it. And coming on to that part about where as society we don't like to talk about death because you don't like to upset the other person. And so even so in depression, I didn't even acknowledge that depression was a thing. I was like, I didn't understand. I didn't have empathy, I guess, even to understand what grief, what depression was. And I thought, okay, when people say they're depressed, like I just didn't understand what it meant, kind of thing, what was happening. And like I said, maybe that's why I didn't recognize that I was, in that road. But it was very much like you say, I struggled thinking I'm through this now, and then would get whacked really hard in a wave that was equally as deep as the previous one I've just come through. And it took quite a lot of waves for that to get those peaks and troughs to get smaller enough for me to go, yeah, I'm through that. That was probably, a 2-year experience or more. It was 2 years was probably the kind of like the bulk of it, kind of thing, and then there was a little bit of residual coming out of that. And then I just wanted to touch on your grief recovery method as well, because I know that I had this conversation with you earlier, and I just had a death in the family when my aunt died last year, and I had a chance to write a letter to her, and I had a completely different experience about death, and that was one of my mum's sisters as well. A third of one of the other sisters that has died. 1 out of 3 of them have gone now. But my relationship was completely different in kind of being more at peace in one way. Sure, I cried, and that sort of thing, because there is always a loss. But so the grief recovery method that you talk about is really, I guess, a thing that I resonated with, and going, oh, I actually have changed my relationship with grief and I understand it. But I want to caveat that, because I think that was that relationship, but it doesn't mean that it will be the same with another relationship for me, of depending on how close I am with the next person I lose, for example. So do you want to just mention a little bit about the grief recovery method?
So, I mean, like you mentioned, the grief goes with love. So, it's the grief goes as much as how much you love that person. So that's why sometimes, somebody that spend time with a pet and no time with their mother might feel that actually with, they grieve more the pet than the mother, because that's their life, that was their love, that was their everyday kind of
attachment, well, really, isn't it?
attachment. Exactly. So it's very much the actual relationships that you had with that person, or that situation, or somebody that was made redundant after working in a company for 25 years might feel absolutely devastated, because it was their life, it was what they were to do, and that's what they wanted to do for the rest of their life as well. It could be, it's all the hope and expectation and dreams that are going, and that's what we look a lot in the grief recovery. And what's the most important in the grief recovery is to be honest with the relationship you had with that person. If you start to be devil, or kind of put your relationship on a pedestal, you're not seeing that relationship honestly. So what I encourage my clients to do is to look at that relationship with that person. I mean, there is more exercise, but to look at that relationship with that situation or person and look at it honestly. You look at it like what's happening, and that, so if I take the example, for example, with my dad, and I've done like a completion with him. One of the things that I've never been happy with him about is he never talked to me or to anybody about my mom, and that was the most effect that it had on my life, really, that I never talked about my mom to anybody until the age of like 29, 30, when I started to ask questions. And so before that, it was a complete lie. So I never did it with my dad. And so that's something that, I can forgive him for. But one of the things that I can apologize to him is I did not ever ask a question ever. So, would have I asked a question, maybe he would have answered. So it's about taking responsibility, about 1% at least of responsibility towards that relationship and towards what that person did. And when you actually see the relationship in a perfect, honest way, then you start to actually say the things that you never dared to say, that was never told, and that was never spoken about, because we didn't at the time, and because there is things with certain people that you don't want to say. And so it is to come to the point where you can actually say those things. You can actually say that you love them, and also you can be angry with them, but the important things is to not get attached to the situation and to breed thoughts and stories. I mean, you and me, Maryline, knows it, that thoughts and feelings are lies. But if we can make up stories quite easily. So the point of the recovery and to be completing with the grief is to actually make sure that you don't make up a story. It's just a statement, it's just a little thing, it's just having a look at the relationship and leaving it there where it is with all honesty and saying what you have to say in the purest of way. So I don't allow my clients to get into the victim and staying in the victim of poor me and look what happened to me. And because that's just seeking acknowledgement and seeking another thing, and you will never kind of complete with your grief if you go there. So that's one of my first things to do, really, kind of like, okay, let's take responsibility here.
That's an interesting point that you make there, because actually for me, I didn't realize, but I lived in that victim for so many years. Like probably up for 17 years after my mum's death, it was almost like I would introduce myself. Hi, my name's Maryline, and my mother died. She drowned in the bushfire on our farm, kind of thing. It was like I really just associated myself with my mother's death, and that was the kind of only definition I had of my life. I really had kind of just, brought my life down to that because I needed the world to know the pain I was in, but I didn't realize it. Like I just didn't, I was saying it, but I just didn't know I needed to get help for it.
Yeah. So more or less what happened there is you were attached, you had the attachment to the pain.
Yeah.
And that's where actually the work is when you actually detach for the pain, then you can actually start to be in your grieving. Because what the unresolved grief is, it's this attachment. You're only going to the pain rather than actually seeing the relationship that you had. So if you only attach yourself to the pain, you don't see and you can't see what this person has given you in their life. You can't see the memories. You can't see the beautiful things that you actually gain from that person. And that's where you want to go. You want to actually go to actually all those memories. You don't, if you stay attached to the pain and seeing only the pain of that moment, there is no way that you can be with all the memories. You're only going to see the bad memories of the last moments. But the thing is, that person was there. If you love that person so much, then there is so much that they've given you in their lives. There is so much memories and so many things that you can remember and actually upload and actually really kind of communicate and be with, because it's about, completing with a grief, if I can call it like that. It's the ability to say goodbye without the pain. It's the ability to actually be allowing the fond memory to come up, allowing to remember that person with the total love that they deserve. So I think that's where it goes, really. Yeah.
I definitely did. I actually do recall. So just the things that I'm saying are just kind of really backing up what you're saying, as in, I know in my personal experience as well, I remember the day, of thinking I'll never, ever let go of the pain in my heart because that's the last attachment that I have to my mum. I literally made that choice.
Yeah.
So I can understand exactly what you're saying. Like I probably was the worst person for myself for so many years because how painful it was, and I didn't know I needed help.
But that's a belief when somebody died or something happened, that if you let go of the pain, you're not going to remember them. You're not going to, you think you're not going to love them enough. It's a real belief that we actually made up, because the pain is so strong and it's so deep that you think that if this happened, then if it goes, then everything would go. And even if the pain goes, I think I'm not going to remember anything anymore. There is this serious fear of, if you don't hold on to the fear, to the pain, everything will actually disappear. That's what the attachment is, really. But if you're honest to yourself, is like, so there is this typical thing as well where people say you're on denial. No, you cannot be on denial. Never. When you've lost somebody, it's because if you're numb, you're numb. But being numb doesn't mean you're in denial. Being numb means that you're covering and try to save yourself from pain, but that's all what I mean. But when we experience grief, believe me, you're not in denial. You know it has happened. That's one of the things that you hear quite often. I think I am in denial. No, you're not. You're not. Never.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, like it is a massively painful thing. So let's just sort of talk a little bit about, because I want to move on to some other topics, but a little bit about the taboo kind of really about it, because I know a lot of people when they suffer some sort of loss or grief, it's difficult for people around them. And some of the work that we do, we know that when you talk to someone or when you tell them something, what you do is you increase the energy in that person. That energy, if you think of an energy starting from a baseline and the energy rises up in that person that you're talking to, the person wants to bring the energy back down to neutral. So they give you a solution for whatever you're talking about so that the pain goes away for them or the energy goes back to neutral for them, right? So it's interesting, like, people want to give you a quick fix. They want to solve your problem. They want you to, to not to not really talk and go on about it. They don't understand like how to kind of go through the pain. You actually have to go through the pain to get to the other side, sort of thing. And so do you want to just make some sort of comments about like how bad it is in society that we don't talk to each other, and that, I mean, the only option is people have got professionals rather than their friends, because people don't want to help in painful ways.
I think we live in a society when we're not, even at school, we're not allowed to talk about feelings or what we feel. So it feels very uncomfortable. I think what's the problem with people around grief or fixing you, is they're uncomfortable with somebody that is not feeling good. So we want to actually keep them away. So please come with me, and we're going to have a good fun tonight, and they never come and tell you, listen, come and have a coffee with me and you tell me all about it. And even if they do that, but you've got to cheer up, and you've got to, I mean, I written a post on my Instagram about, toxic positivity.
In that, like, people might, even if they do invite you for a coffee and they say, I'm here for you, I'm happy to chat, kind of thing, it's usually only for such a short period of time. Like, I remember when, going out with my friends in Australia, death was such a massive concept. My brain couldn't handle it. It was really imploding at the time, trying to get your head around that concept. But, my mother and I were quite close. And so, like, I struggled very much with trying to figure out what the hell was going on inside me. And, like, people do want to talk to you and go, oh, how are you going? And then it's for 5 minutes and then you're just gone. But your world, when you've lost whatever it might be, whatever grieving your loss you're suffering, whether it be a bereavement or any other, that is all you've got in your mind to focus on 24/7. But it doesn't go away, does it?
Yeah. It doesn't. And people want to make it go away. That's the thing. They want to rescue you, and they want to make you feel better and all that. And they're doing it for you, but they're doing it for themselves because it's very uncomfortable. And and the only thing you can do is to actually be present and listen. I mean, the thing is, we're so not used to it. So last year or last year, my son went from primary to secondary, and they're scared. They're shit scared. They're in their little primary. They've been there for 7 years, and it's all cozy and it's all nice. And they know all the teachers. They've gone through all the schools. They know everybody in there. They're used to their little class. It's the same class. And now they're being told that they're going in secondary, where they're going to move teachers every hour, where they're actually maybe not in the same group of students in all hours. And it's just so scared. But part of them part of them is like, oh, big school, I'm getting beat. So they're very being courageous on one side and then really scared on the other. And then like everybody's crying, I'm going to lose you and my friend. And people are saying, oh no, but it's a big school, you've got to be brave and, you're going to make so many friends, And primary schools is some friends, but now you're going to make new friends. And it's like, my God, please, can you just stop? Because it's just about acknowledging that right now they are scared, they're in pain, there is it's not about but it's about acknowledging their feeling right now, and I think we don't do that enough. So like we were saying with grief, it's like we don't acknowledge our friends' pain. We want to fix. So in fixing with the kids, we said, no, but it's going to be better. Or do you want a sweetie? Or do you want to, we fill them up with food. So that's another thing. Please don't do that. Just sit down with your kid on the sofa and let them tell you what it is, but don't give them any food, because that's where it all starts. I'm feeling that pain. I'm having a cookie. Great. So this is kind of quite important to actually teach the kids, for me, to do that, because we want to get away from it. I mean, the other thing is like, you break up with a boyfriend and people are telling you, you're better off without him. And it's like, what are you saying? It's like, okay, he was not the best man. Maybe we were not but I just had a long, kind of relationship with that person. So, it's something was happening there. So it's all about kind of being careful with that. I mean, the worst one for me is when they say to somebody that had a miscarriage, you can have another one. And it's like, please acknowledge that something has just gone on. It's crazy. I mean, the myth that we have around, it's actually kind of, what you can hear. Me, the one that I heard when I was a kid, and I cannot remember who said it or where I heard it on how, but I obviously overheard a conversation of what somebody in my family saying, oh, Maryline will be all right, she won't feel anything, when my mom died. And it's like, wow, that impacted me so much. It's, it's been with me all the time, because, I was not supposed to feel anything then. That's what they said. I was, so yeah, I've been numb and not feeling anything and thinking that all my depression was from something different than what was that. So yeah, there is a lot of work to do still about waking up the people about what to do when, as that's one of the, how to behave with somebody who is grieving. I think it's very important to know that, because it will happen to us. So me and you might know how to be with somebody who is grieving because we have experiences. But a lot of people might have not experienced it yet, and they don't understand, or they can't see how deep grief can be. And I don't blame them, but it is about this kind of teaching. There is some teaching need to be done, and how, because grief is not about, we're not broken, we're just grieving. We don't need rescuing, we don't need fixing, we don't need all those things. We're just grieving. And it's a process that we have to go through, and it's a process that we can't avoid, and it has to be done. We have to go through it one way or another.
And you're right, like it's such an interesting way that the society has kind of evolved around this, because every generation knows the pain and suffering and the losses that they've experienced from when they were a small child to every year that they've gone through life, and they've suddenly lost a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, an auntie, uncle, whatever it might be, cousins. Like, every generation has experience, yet still we are in this place where we try to, like you say, fix the other person.
Yeah.
So yeah, grief is a big one. And I know you sort of mentioned a little bit about secondary grief earlier. We've only got sort of 10 minutes left, but we've got still so much to talk about. But just to touch on that really in relation to COVID, because there's some experiences that people would have had probably in the last year, massively different to the way that they've been able to deal with funerals, and I think it's been really great that we've been able to get online funerals, because that's made it easier. Well,
Yeah.
certainly for me it's made it easier being overseas. When
Yeah.
my auntie died in Australia, I was able to have a video link to be part of that event, which was fabulous for me. So I think there's going to be some benefits, but there is a huge loss when you're not together with the humans, and that you're not able to kind of hug each other or cry with each other, and allow your emotions to just flow and support each other and all that sort of stuff at the time. So just talk a little bit about what would people have suffered in relation to COVID and the changes.
Yeah, I think the first one that I comes to mind is um, a lot of what's happened with COVID. A lot of people have died alone. So whether it is they might have had a nurse that was there when they died and kind of relate to the family after that, and the family knows that they can't be there. But the problem is I think a lot of people might come out with a lot of guilt about not being there at the last moment, and not being there to actually relieve them and leaving them. A lot of people I've heard like leaving, having to go from the room and leaving the person dying with fear, and have that last memory of living with a fear. So I think that's a secondary loss of, like, not only you're losing, but you're left with this feeling of guilt that you haven't been there. And then there is like all the funeral that is being organized in a complete different ways than what you would expect. So a lot of people cannot say goodbye. A lot of people have to be left behind, or they have to say goodbye through a telephone, and that's been all the secondary loss, that the goodbye hasn't been done properly. It's a little bit in the same way when there is, you lose somebody through an accident, and it's all happened suddenly, that everything is a little bit different. I think with COVID as well, another thing that will happen is all the other losses that there is when kind of lose somebody, because you have the guilt of, have I passed the COVID to that person? There is all this thing going on here, who's passed it to who when it's in the family, what has happened here? I got it, I survived, and she didn't survive. There is all those kind of things where, I am okay, but the other one is not okay. So that really puts some layers to the grief that you're going to have, and that's going to be a difficult one to actually come out. And all the all the losses that those kids that are like kind of studying from school and not meeting their friends and not actually kind of socializing that much. I don't know, we don't know right now how much they're being affected as such. For me, I'm making sure that there is a connection somewhere, but that's going to be a secondary loss in that way, where you don't really know the fact that they've lost their routine every day. So the kid that goes to school, and then everything is like kind of losing their friends, losing that communication, how to do the class. I think there is a lot of anxiety and stress to the people that are actually in A level and not knowing what's going to happen with their degrees and things, and that put a lot of stress and different things going on there. So yeah, that's going to be a difficult one.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of the things that we've talked about is like we go through change and evolution in so many different phases of life, not just death, like you talked about earlier. You talked about, if we were made redundant from being in a job that we've been there for a very long time, that can be a really difficult time to transition. And then you talked about, going from junior school to a more senior school. I remember going through that myself, actually, the change and the fear and and all of those things. So we do, and so this is, I guess, the point where you talk about loss is not just about bereavement, but it's really related to lots of things that change, I guess, and if something changes and it's not what you had before or the way it is, how do you deal with it the next time it comes around, like anniversaries, like birthdays, like all sorts of things. So maybe you could give, is there anything that you could sort of give as a tip maybe for people?
I mean, I think because when you lose somebody, they're going to be the first anniversary. There is going to be the first time for everything. The first time you go shopping on your own, the first Mother's Day, the first Christmas, the first time you go on holiday on your own, or whatever. I think for me is, first of all, be prepared for it. Be aware that it's coming, be prepared for it. And acknowledge very much, what do you want for that day? What do you want to do? Do you want to start a ritual within a family nucleus or by yourself? But it's got to be very personal what you're going to do. But I believe that it's all about being prepared. It's about, really acknowledging that day is coming and really put some thought into what do you want that day for yourself? What would you like to do? Do you want to go to the grave? Do you want to actually light a candle at home and put a Mother's Day card, for example? Do you want to do like a ritual in the way that, we're going to go where she likes to go on holiday every year, because she loves being there and we're going to go there every year, for example, or completely like say, listen, we're not going to spend Christmas anymore. We're going to go on holiday every Christmas because I don't want that anymore. If she's not going to be there, I don't want it. Just make a decision into what actually pleases you and what, the worst thing is to ignore it, come to the day freaking out because you don't know, and really fearing that day is coming. Be prepared because it's going to happen. And what do you want that day to be like for you? That's one of the tips that I would give.
Yeah,
Really.
wonderful. So we're almost at time now, which is a shame because I could talk to you for like 16 hours, I think, on this topic. I'm just gonna I've got your details. Obviously we're connected, so I'm going to put your details for people who may want to reach out to you with this video, for those that have been watching live, although I can't see anyone on there at the moment, but people will watch this from the Facebook groups or from the YouTube channel when we post it, and might want to get in touch with you. So your details will be below for Instagram and Facebook. Yeah.
And Facebook, and they can DM me for any questions, really, and any thoughts or any comment. That would be great.
Yeah. So when you say DM, that's direct message, just in case people are not familiar with all the social media terms. We've got some older people here too, and that might watch this.
We spent the last year. I've learned so much. I didn't talk like that before, but
Yeah, yeah.
But we've become really tech
Savvy. Lovely. Yeah. It's been really amazing and wonderful to have you on here. Like, I love having these chats with you, and there's so much more depth that we can go
yeah.
into around these topics, I know. So, happy to do another session, which we could just focus on anything
On
other
one
than
thing.
bereavement, really, because we really have focused so much on that. And there's lots of other
Yeah.
losses, which might be pertinent to people nowadays, like around youngsters coping with COVID and all sorts of stuff like
Yeah.
that. So happy to do another session around some other things
Yeah.
that might
And
impact different
maybe a bit
generations.
more. Yeah, and maybe a bit more specific about something precise, like how to create your own death, and how do you prepare for death, maybe, or something like that as well.
Yeah.
There's loads.
Yes. Plenty to talk about, isn't it? So interestingly enough, that my next couple of coffee chat guests that I've got on are very kind of in this same arena, sort of. So I've got a lady coming on next Wednesday who is a trauma kind of expert. She's also in the same super conscious world and consciousness training that we do.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, she also does energy work. So she'll be talking about, how energy work can help with trauma and that sort of stuff. And I've actually got a special episode happening this Sunday where I'm talking to Jane, another person I've met through this work. And Jane is going to be talking to us about life-changing diagnoses. So that's going to be a really big one for people if they want to come on and ask questions and get some support from Jane when they're experiencing something themselves, directly impacting. So that's the next couple that I've got lined up. But it's so lovely to have you on here, and thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
me.
Thank you for having me.
That's right.
Anytime.
And so, is there anything that, just in sort of wrapping up, and I know we're like already 2 minutes over, that you'd like to leave as a kind of final message or of support, or something for anybody who watches this video?
Yeah, I mean, just be aware of people around you, I think. If they tell you that they're grieving, I think they need all the support, but not the fixing. I think for tonight, that's where I would go. I would go more about, be aware of the people that are grieving around you. Because right now there are going to be a lot of them, and we need to learn to actually support each other in that way. So
Yeah, you're right. Huge change afoot, really, in the way we work together and support each other and get through this change that we're experiencing together now.
exactly. So that's where I would actually take the people, really.
Wonderful. Well, I'll put your details on here for people to reach out and ask questions and, be in contact with you and join any groups that you've got going that might help them and support them.
All
And
right.
we'll also do some more chat sessions where we can help some people as well, with other topics. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Maryline. Thank you.
Okay, I've stopped the live.
Stopped everything.
Stop the recording. How do I do that?